That was close. Hello, Alabama fans. Welcome to the BOL Alabama post-game show. Y'all missed it. Andrew Bone just shot me a bird. I needed that. I needed witnesses. He's really telling me I'm his number one guy he's ever worked with his middle finger or his weird, better than his weird thumb. But this is the BamaOnLine post-game show. Jimmy Stein is making his way through the crowd. He's probably singing a little yellow rammer jammer right now, a little yellow hammer. He's probably been in a few yellow hammers, but he'll be coming on
He's
the
a little
show.
yellow hammered right now, isn't he?
Yeah, Jimmy's a little yellow hammered. That was a good game. Joseph Hastings will be joining us here in a few minutes. He sent me a weird text, so I'll put him in 5-minute timeout. But roll tide to everybody. Great, watching these games today, Andrew. I mean, not only is it good to win a game where you kind of made mistakes, because I really thought Bama needed to win the turnover battle to win this game, but I lied.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, I mean, they 4 turnovers for Alabama before they were able to get their first turnover, and obviously that was a big play there in the fourth quarter with Bray Hubbard getting that pick, and then Xavier Brown getting another pick when Auburn was trying to drive the field. So I think the takeaway from the game is Alabama controlled the line of scrimmage, had over 200 yards rushing. They also had 52 rushing attempts on the day, and it wasn't Jalen Milroe led the team in rushing yards, but it was Jam Miller with 28 rushing attempts. I mean, I don't think we've seen a running back with more than 20 rushing attempts the entire season. So I thought it was a great game by the rushing attack. And, you kind of felt like throughout the entire night, all right, Alabama looks like the better team. They should be putting them away. The score could be a lot worse than it is. I thought that second half opening drive was perfect to go up 21-6. Probably could have been a little bit worse, but credit to Auburn for staying in the game. But those turnovers is that's what kept them in there.
Yeah, I mean, you come into this game. I mean, it was weird for me is because all the Auburn people I knew, even our moderators on the Auburn side, everybody thought Auburn would lose the Auburn side. But I would say it was a decent vocal opinion of the Alabama fans that they might lose. I mean, it was a very negative week. I mean, again, coming off Oklahoma, loss in the way it was, I understood that. But I will say Kalen DeBoer and them have been able to rally after a bad game. 9-3, I don't think we're shocked. We're at 9-3. I think the way we got here has been a little bit beat Georgia, lost Oklahoma. I think there's been a lot of that. But beating the Iron Bowl, what did Kobe say? 5 in a row, right? That's 5 in a row.
5 in a row, and it keeps
nice little win streak.
And Auburn does not get bowl eligible. I mean, that's a big deal for Alabama. Regardless of what happens with the college football playoff, you needed to go in and win this game because Auburn had won 2 straight. They had just beaten Texas A&M, a big emotional game at home, and I think while they may not have had any of of their reporters believing in them, the Auburn team certainly believed in themselves. We saw a lot of talk.
The freshman was feeling it.
DeMarcus Riddick said he would not lose to Alabama while he was playing at Auburn. And hey, you know what?
Wrong answer.
I don't mind the confidence, but he is now 0-1 against the Crimson Tide. So,
he said they never lose.
Malachi Moore, 5-0 against Auburn, an in-state kid that really helped keep that team together during the off season. You think about those guys like Malachi, Tyler Booker, even Jalen Milroe, disappointing some of these losses, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, even the road loss to Tennessee, but getting that win against Auburn, that matters to a lot of people. And it certainly mattered to this team today.
When it matters the most if you lose that game, because every time Alabama's lost it has been just a catastrophe going into this game. And I think a little bit of that negative from Alabama fans was worried about losing this, trying to go ahead and let themselves down easy. But I don't think Auburn's a particularly good team this year. I think they're a solid team. They've been competitive. But they're 3 weeks removed from a 17-7 loss at home to Vanderbilt, who's kind of on their – although Vandy's the scrappiest team I think I've seen all year, just didn't have the depth to compete. But I felt like Alabama, I think coming off the Oklahoma game, I understood the uncertainty. but I do think Alabama, again, was a double-digit favorite, came in here, lost the turnover battle, and still had their ways. And again, okay, Joe, we're going to add Jimmy in first. He sprinted home somehow. I'm not even sure why Jimmy's here yet. That is you saying Stein here.
Yeah, man.
We'll get to Joseph in a minute. Look at Jimmy's got a little bit of a red nose in that
Oh,
cold.
it was freaking cold in
Bit of
there,
that,
man.
A little bit of that cold weather. Jimmy, 5 in a row, won the Iron Bowl. In a game that really didn't have to sweat it, especially, again, we'll get into this later, but the other teams sweating not just sweating their rivalry games, losing as big favorites. But thoughts on the game, not the individual players, but just winning 5 in a row. The importance of Kalen DeBoer winning his first Iron Bowl, only the second coach to ever beat Auburn in Bryant-Denny.
Some people are going to minimize the accomplishment, the beating Auburn in your first Iron Bowl. And I think Kalen DeBoer also it's officially won more games than any other Alabama first-year coach. And people will minimize it and say, yeah, look what he inherited. This isn't he inherited a Ferrari and all that's, good points, true. But it is an accomplishment to be the winningest first-year coach and to beat Auburn in your first Iron Bowl, because if it went the other way, we'd be talking about that quite a bit. What I like, guys, is there were some of the same issues that we've seen in the losses, those turnovers, that really hurt Alabama last week. But this week they overcame it. They just, I saw some toughness on the part of the defense that was nice. And I thought up front on offense, they played pretty well. It wasn't perfect, but we got to remember on the right side, they played Wilkin Formby about half that game at right tackle for the first time in a while that Formby's played that many snaps. Gino Vandemark had to play a lot of snaps for Jaden Roberts again. So that right side of the offensive line, due to injury and that right tackle performance, never really settled up. But overall, the offensive line was fairly good, and I like the toughness on defense.
Yeah, I mean, I see some of them criticizing Jalen right now, which I find kind of weird. I mean, I thought he obviously had a good game. I think overall, when you look at this team, I mean, what they wanted to do, you needed to get this win, Andrew, to get to National Signing Day. We're all recruiting guys. We just want to get to Wednesday and survive Wednesday. It'd have been a lot harder to get there because of all the negativity, surrounding it. I mean, that's blasted. Maybe this for Alabama fans, a little bit of finished Thanksgiving. What do we got at 8:30 tonight? We got basketball. We got Alabama getting paid a lot of money, Andrew, to play in that game. But Andrew, again, going back to Jalen, perhaps his final game in Tuscaloosa, give us some thoughts there.
Yeah, it's been kind of an up and down season with Jalen. I mean, we've seen some rough games. We've seen some unbelievable games. I mean, we saw his game against Georgia. We saw his game against LSU. We saw his game against Tennessee. We saw his game last week against Oklahoma. And you're like, what Jalen were we going to get this week? And we got the good Jalen. He had a great game. I thought he threw the ball really well. Man, if he would have connected on that long deep pass to Ryan Williams, I thought that was a perfect play. Perfect play design, perfect pass. Ryan just couldn't haul it in at the last minute. But, man, he threw some great balls. Jeremy Bernard, who has been so good throughout the entire season, probably does not get enough credit as he should. I mean, he was outstanding. I think he went over 100 yards. But, if this was Jalen's final game at Bryant-Denny Stadium, which a lot of people, believe it might be, what a way to go out, beating Auburn again, having a great performance and, something that a lot of people, are going to remember. I mean, he had a couple turnovers, but at the end of the day, he beat Auburn again.
Yeah. And you come in and I got to show this. Look at my girl come popping in here, guys. Look at this.
Audrey.
We got a special guest. We got the boss. We got the boss coming in here. Look at Audrey. Audrey, what we need is Andrew to put a log on the fire at Jimmy's house so his nose will go back. Welcome, Miss Bone, to the show. We got all
these people at our house. I just keep loading this fire.
All I know is she better like and subscribe this podcast so she can get all the notifications. But again, 5 in a row. You beat Auburn. You walk in 9-3. I don't even want to know about the playoffs right now. I mean, Clemson lost. You had Miami lost. Yeah. Ohio State lost. I mean, it's almost enjoy. And again, I can't stress this enough. The sooner I think all fans accept football's now harder than it's ever been, and it's the best time to learn to enjoy the wins. And you got to let the losses go. I mean, Ohio State 20-point favorite or whatever lost to Michigan at home. That's not a lot different than losing at Oklahoma, I can assure you. Miami losing to Syracuse. I mean, Georgia last night. I mean, my goodness. Another 18-point, 19-point favorite at home against Georgia Tech. Football's equaling it out. So the good moments, you better enjoy them because the bad moments are going to be there, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, so many chances last night for Georgia Tech to win that game, and football is. Everyone tries to say, "Oh, well, you look at Alabama's team this year, and they lost at Oklahoma, and they lost, at Vanderbilt." But who actually are the 12 best teams in the country right now? You can't. I don't think anyone has a complete full confidence in who those 12 teams are right now because nobody's playing their best football. We're going to see Oregon tonight. We're going to see Texas against Texas A&M. We're going to see what they look like. But, man, there's been a lot of upsets this year. Georgia could have easily lost last night, but Syracuse beating Miami, I think that sort of opens up the door a little bit there. But, what's going to happen over the rest of tonight and then next week in championship, maybe Alabama does sneak in there. You just never know.
Yeah, there's crazy math going on here, Jimmy. When you look at the team coming in 9 wins, we were talking with Andrew earlier. I don't think 9-3 is a super shock for this season. I think it's how you got there, losing to Vandy, beating to Georgia, losing to Oklahoma, some of the things that you did to get here, beating the LSU the way you did tonight, who's obviously fallen a long ways. Just your total thoughts. I mean, we have waited at least the last 5 years. What's it going to be like when Nick Saban's gone, right? What's it going to be like? Well, we're here fighting for the number one class in recruiting. Fight 9-3, won the Iron Bowl. Possibly, at least in the playoff discussion. What are your thoughts on the first year as a whole?
I think there's plenty for the glass half full folks to rally around, and there's some meat there for the glass half empty folks to complain. I do think 9-3. With this roster, I'm not sure. You could argue that they underachieved, with the roster at 9-3, but at the same time, this was one of the toughest schedules in Alabama history. I think it's a tougher schedule than any of the schedules that even Coach Saban played when you factor in how difficult those road games. I mean, at Oklahoma, at LSU, at Tennessee, a road trip to Madison, Wisconsin, and Missouri's good, and you're playing Georgia at home. That was a really, really tough schedule. I think 10-2 would have been fantastic. You finished just one game short of that. I think the losing to Vanderbilt, while I realize it's not your typical Vanderbilt, it's still that's a road loss that should have been a win when you look at Alabama's roster versus theirs. So, I think mixed results, but enough to get excited about because of the recruiting class in particular. I think when you factor in, hey, you were just one win short of a great year, and the recruiting class was great. There's a lot to be excited about that's completely legitimate. I'm sure the folks that will complain that they have some legit gripes. But overall, guys, I think the transition was smoother than how I imagined it would be.
Is there anybody who didn't underachieve in college football outside of maybe Oregon? Oregon, did anybody? I mean, would Texas is upset they lost to Georgia. Georgia lost 2 games.
How good is Oregon? I mean,
we don't know. We don't.
How good is it?
Know.
How good are they? They almost lost to Wisconsin 2 weeks ago.
They almost lost to Ohio State, who just lost to Michigan. So when you get into these domino type things, Jimmy, I mean, it's hard to say that there's anybody super happy with their season. I mean, there's going to be 12 teams in there, but we'll just see if Alabama's one of them.
We have additional bones. There's additional bones. It wasn't just the wife.
Jimmy, give us some thoughts here on what's going to happen the rest of the way out as far as playoffs and all that stuff.
I think the Syracuse win was big. Obviously Clemson losing to South Carolina is big. I wouldn't say that what's happened today has put Alabama in the playoff, but it has made Tuesday night, the ranking show, very interesting. If Alabama's still on the outside looking in, Tuesday night. You still have the ACC championship game next weekend that could bring Alabama back into play. So I think Alabama is either in, based on today's results, or very close and could potentially get in after championship weekend. But there were the results there were two results today that no doubt helped Alabama's case: Syracuse and the Clemson, South Carolina game.
We did not kick Andrew out. He has a lot of guests, and once that it's like a dam breaking with the water. Once they got in, they were not leaving. Joseph Hastings, your thought on Alabama. I mean, we're such recruiting guys. It's kind of like last year you played the Iron Bowl, you played the SEC championship game, and you still had a couple weeks till signing day. This thing's coming on Wednesday, right? Yeah. I mean, this thing's coming down the barrel. Give us some thoughts on the game, Joseph Hastings.
And let me just say, it's my third year covering Alabama. Alabama's 3-0 during that time, so I would like to take some responsibility for 3 of those Iron Bowl wins, if I may.
You deserve
3-0.
Well earned. Well earned, JoJo.
3-0.
Thank you.
Did the best I could,
Thank you.
Doing the work every day. But yeah, no, it was an interesting win. I've never seen a 14-point win like that one before. Definitely could have easily been 40 points the way Alabama was playing at certain spots, but they shot themselves in the foot. Costly turnovers, can't have that, especially when you're playing against better competition. A better team absolutely would have beaten Alabama on that day, but there definitely was a talent discrepancy. But once again, you go out, you guys talked about it, you win the Iron Bowl, you end the regular season on a good note. Obviously, we'll wait to see what the playoff implications are, but anytime you beat Auburn, especially your 5th straight win, that's of note. In-state battles, recruiting battles, not only for 2025, 2026, that matters. This is just, I think this kind of summed up Alabama's season. It was Alabama's season in a nutshell, where you saw the glimpses of greatness, what they could be, especially the start of the second half, that touchdown drive, and then you saw just the utter chaos and how bad it could get for them. So I think it was kind of the whole season wrapped up in one 4-quarter game there.
I think when you look, like, if you're a fan, the one thing that's negative about being a fan, if you're so passionate just about your fan base, about your team, you don't realize bad stuff is happening to everybody, right? You don't look. I mean, we have people saying, why don't Ohio State lose 2 commit? They don't lose any recruits. Bama does. They lost 2 the day before that was posted. There's a whole thread saying it doesn't happen. Auburn had a decommitment out of the blue to Florida today. These decommitments, recruiting is recruiting. So from that angle, you can't really predict it. You don't know exactly what's going to happen on this Wednesday. You just do the best you can and cover it. I mean, you saw what with Bryce Underwood. So recruiting is what it is. But the season, I think this season in flux for everybody, and I think this is going to be the norm, Jimmy, going forward. So more important than ever for Kalen DeBoer to get his guys. And that's not to say he's not comfortable with a big portion of these guys, but he wants his guys on that campus.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, basketball is a better example. I think with football, it's harder to wrap our heads around it because it's so big. But in basketball, notice how everybody's roster, including Alabama's, at the top of the sport. The roster changes out. You have a radically different team year to year. The team's radically different. Football, there's 85 guys and soon 105, and it's harder to change out the whole thing in 1 year, but there's still a lot of change year to year, and I think that's why we're going to see wild swings, a lack of consistency. It's hard to build a football team in less than a year in terms of getting everybody on the same page and a new offense and a new defense and new guys. And I think what we saw this year, Tim, you're exactly right. All years going forward are going to look like this, where there's a lot of disjointed teams. Ohio State pays $20 million for a roster and still can't beat their rival. You're going to see stuff like that, And as far as Alabama, when you're talking about the season and Jalen Milroe, you mentioned him earlier. I want to mention this just because I think this is important. Milroe had an extremely up and down year. There's the huge high after Georgia. He played fantastic. Said it before, it was the most productive day by a quarterback against an AP top 5 team in history. I mean, that's how big that performance was. He's also a National Player of the Week candidate for his performance against LSU. There's been other times where he's been terrible. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. He's been really bad. Didn't give his team a chance to win the game. I thought tonight's game was like the whole season in 60 minutes. There was fantastic Jalen and the reason Alabama won the game. And then there was bad Jalen, the reason Auburn stayed in the game. And it was just like, well, Jalen gave us his whole season in 60 minutes there. But what I hope people remember, if that was Jalen's last game, is I don't know that Alabama beats Georgia without Jalen Milroe. I don't know that Alabama beats exactly.
Twice.
Alabama doesn't win the SEC and beat Georgia last year without Jalen Milroe. It just seems that too many of the people that dwell on the bad don't acknowledge not just the good, but the great. And it's okay for those that just want to talk about the great all time to acknowledge, hey, it's not perfect. It's not perfect. And it rarely is for any college quarterback. But I just appreciate Milroe for the great stuff. And he delivered a win over Auburn at the end. A lot of it was on his arm and his shoulders today. And then he gave us a taste of the bad too, because of course.
I think time will lessen what we thought about Jalen, kind of like Jalen Hurts. I mean, I know people that like deny that, Jalen Hurts was kind of in this same boat a lot of the time. Yeah. And he had that too. Remember the Mississippi State game where he threw one of the best passes in the history of Alabama football to Smitty for that touchdown, but the rest of the game was just a bad game.
Terrible.
Clemson, not great, then has the run. You know what I mean? That was just Jalen. But I do think that at the end of the day, I mean, it's going to be about getting the fit that you want at quarterback, right, Joseph? I mean, it's not to say, I mean, they didn't have a lot of time with Jalen to begin with. I mean, they come in, they've been here. Like I told a buddy of mine who was like, Luke, they've been here like 10 months. When I told him that today, we're on the phone, it's been 10 months. He was blown away because it does. It felt like it's been 3 years.
I think that's why there's a lot of excitement. Jimmy talked about the recruiting class that Alabama's bringing in for someone like Keelan Russell. This is Kalen DeBoer's quarterback. This is the guy that he's brought in. Obviously, he brought in Austin Mack via the transfer portal, but Keelan, I've talked with a couple of wide receivers too about this, about how wide receiver recruits, about how the offense is going to open up more from a passing perspective. And, I think people sometimes read that and take it as a shot at Jalen. I don't think it necessarily is. Look, they're two different quarterbacks, two different playing styles. Keelan is hoping to mimic the Michael Penix version of Kalen DeBoer's quarterback, which is what he wants to operate that high-flying passing attack that we saw there at Washington. I think there's a lot of excitement for that and the weapons that Coach DeBoer is bringing in, his guys. That's not saying this roster isn't talented. Obviously, they just went to the college football playoff last year and could have very well, they could have been very well in the SEC championship this year had they won that game against Oklahoma. They would have been. So, this was a talented roster, but it wasn't Coach DeBoer's guys. Now you're bringing in the roster, the guys that he wants, and I think you're going to see a lot of changes.
Yeah, and I think people confuse. We're not saying there wasn't any talent at Alabama. There is talent at Alabama. I also say it's not the normal talent at Alabama. How do I know? Because there's not going to be 4 first-round draft picks. There's not going to be 3 second-round draft picks. So not quite the same, but talent for sure. But it's just talent. Tommy Frazier was an incredibly talented quarterback for the old people watching, right?
Yeah, I remember.
How many schools would he have fit in at? You know what I mean? He fit in for the option schools. So the fit is also something you want to look at. And you've got guys that can do both. You think Ty Simpson had that resume coming out of high school. Keelan Russell is a guy that way, similar to Bryce. He can run when he wants to. And that was everybody said Bryce could run when he wanted to in high school. He just didn't have to a lot, Jimmy.
That's right. And I get asked, I thought the most interesting question out there, and we read there's a lot on the round table this week about this. I was fascinated by everybody's opinion. I appreciate when everybody chips in because this was like a real brain twister for me. They talked about, well, Jalen's not running the DeBoer offense. And what is that? Because every quarterback Kalen DeBoer's had has been radically different. I mean, Jalen Milroe's not like Michael Penix, and Michael Penix not like Jake Haener. And the last quarterback that Kalen DeBoer got committed to Washington before he walked out the door was Will Rogers, who's nothing like Michael Penix. He's a little bit like Jake Haener. And now he commits Keelan Russell, who's kind of different than all of them, really. I'm just saying, I think Kalen DeBoer, much like a Lane Kiffin, he's an offensive guy that builds it around what he's got. He wants the best quarterback possible, and then he builds it out from there. I don't think there is some cookie cutter Kalen DeBoer quarterback. They've all been different. They all bring something to the table. I think he's just one of these guys that can build it around whatever he's got. So I just think that part's really interesting. And hey, let's look what happens with the 2026 quarterback. I'll guess before we ever know what's going to happen or who that guy's going to be, I'll guess it's somebody that might be a little different than Keelan Russell.
I'd like to thump Jimmy on his swollen, frozen nose for bringing up 2026 recruits this early on. I would like to kick him in the marbles. But
there's also 2027 because there's good quarterbacks.
Now literally I'm on my way. I'm about to get in the car, finish this, drive out there, kick you right in the rear. But you're right. It's interesting to see. The biggest thing to me, I think, with this offense is to get the guy you want, which they did extensive research with Keelan Russell, okay, and then to have time to work with him. Because, again, how much time have they had with Jalen Milroe? I mean, you had a different offensive coordinator, a different head coach last year, but you want that guy. Now you're working on your second year with everybody on this roster. Going into the spring, it will be your second year with them, Joseph.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's what's also exciting when you see Austin Mack and what he was able to do against Mercer is the development that he had year over year going, from Washington to Alabama and staying with Kalen DeBoer and staying with that system, seeing that that continuity there. I think that's what makes him an interesting candidate when you look at the 2025 quarterback competition. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Tim. It's not just about, I think there's been a lot of discussion about Keelan Russell taking over next year, which would be really tough for a true freshman quarterback to do, especially with the talent in that room. But it's more so about the years going forward and the development, the fact that he's already talking with Kalen DeBoer and Nick Sheridan about what he likes in an offense, how he likes to operate things, and can kind of, put in his input. That's what's really encouraging when you look for the future here. So they had to take a group, they had to make a. Look, I've covered different programs in my time and coaching staff changes. This is the toughest one that I've seen. Coming over, from Washington, a different conference, coming over to the SEC, all the coaches they had to bring in, trying to keep the team together with the hectic nature of the transfer portal, multiple transfer portal windows they had to deal with. You're trying to bring in your guys, trying to keep who's on the roster, deal with departures. I thought, obviously the loss to Vandy and the loss to Oklahoma, those are going to reign, in people's mind. They're going to, when they think about the season. But I thought the staff did a heck of a job for what they had to deal with this season. I think there's a lot of encouraging signs for the future going forward.
Yeah, I think this is the biggest thing is to get settled, get everything you want in this on this roster. And again, I've said that all along. The portal window was brutal.
Yeah.
To Alabama because they went through the Nick Saban portal window, which was, headlocking half the kids to stay. I mean, Isaiah Bond had a foot and a half out the door before Nick Saban convinced him. Then you go into that portal window. It's like 30 days. It's a damn month. You know what I mean? That's a long time, and then you turn around.
And during that time, Tim, Alabama can't go out and get kids. We can only lose kids. Can't go out and get them.
That was what was crazy. And then when the other schools finally did have coaching changes, they waited so late, except for Washington. They waited so late with Michigan. Their window was closed as far as enrollment could go. So, again, this gives them a new slate, clean path, wipe the eraser board. Joseph doesn't know what that is. That's a chalkboard. You probably never heard of it.
Yeah.
But we're wiping it clean. You've heard of a eraser board. You haven't heard of a chalkboard. You're like, chalk? What is that?
No, I've done the Bart Simpson. I will not do this.
Yeah.
I got in trouble a couple times back in the day. You guys don't know.
Oh, wow. I'm proud of you.
That's breaking news.
Jimmy, give us a final thought. We got Alabama basketball in a little less than 2 hours. A fun basketball team trying to win a shit ton of money with the NIL. I still don't know how that works, so I don't even want to talk about that. But you got that. You got an Iron Bowl win. Give us a final thought on your stance. I mean, you've been a long-time Alabama fan since your hair was blonde and went down to the middle of your back.
Yeah, my hair was blonde when I was a
was it? I took a stab. I just took a stab in the dark.
It was blonde till I was like 4 or 5 years old, and then it turned brown, and then it turned gray when I was 28.
I got this weird thing working. I don't know.
I blame the gray hair on field goal kickers. I think Alabama fans should feel really optimistic going forward. I mean, I think the staff did a good job. I think recruiting has gone fantastic. The basketball team has never been better. A lot of the other sports on campus are actually really good. Baseball's on an uptick. Softball's really good. Gymnastics is good. I mean, there's a lot to be excited about at Alabama, including football. I think we should be excited a little bit about this staff getting a full cycle to recruit the transfer portal, which they didn't do a year ago. We just saw what they did with almost a full cycle of high school recruiting. And let's see how the roster changes out. One thing I'll beg fans to do, I'll be begging on look, the portal opens next week. There's going to be Alabama guys that leave. Don't freak out over every guy that enters the portal. First of all, you've got to have guys leave to make room to bring in the high school recruits and others. And secondly, just because a guy leaves, that doesn't mean that it's going to have a negative effect on the talent level overall. So just trust that DeBoer and Courtney Morgan are going to manage this roster well. It's one of the things that I have a lot of confidence in with Kalen and Courtney Morgan is managing the roster, and that really starts Wednesday and next week.
Joseph, give us a thought.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of piggybacking off of that comment, just because someone enters the portal doesn't necessarily mean that it's the biggest deal in the world, it's the biggest loss in the world. That's kind of sometimes a reflection of who's already in that position group and who's in that room already and how well they're doing. So, there will be departures. Alabama will make additions. There's the give and take of the transfer portal. But like Jimmy said, there's a lot of things to work off of, off of this year. Obviously, the expectations at Alabama are national championships. That is the standard that they've set there. And any season that doesn't result in that, there is going to be a little bit of a disappointment. But for everything that Kalen DeBoer and his staff had to deal with this year, taking over the greatest head college football coach of all time, the multiple transfer portal windows that we talked about, trying to do their thing on the recruiting trail, rebuild that 2025 class up. And then also just win football games on the actual football field. It could have gone better in some ways, but there was a lot to build off of this year and next year beyond.
I mean, you lost the greatest coach of all time, without a doubt, who's had struggles with this team. And for the people that don't want to have any fond memories of Jalen Milroe, I'll remind you of that Auburn game last year where he completed a 4th and 31 pass that should live in infamy. He did that, which is a hell of a winner. This would be a 1-game winning streak. I can tell you that now.
Can't recall the receiver that caught the ball. I'll never remember that guy's name. I don't remember. Don't remember that guy.
Yeah,
but you got an Alabama team fighting for a top 5 class. They're 9-3. You got a basketball team that's probably top 5 in the country competing like that. I mean, things aren't all that bad for Alabama right now. So we hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving. Look forward to it. You can find us at BamaOnLine.com. We've had a lot of recruiting news and notes today. We have surprise visitors popping up. We've had nugget on a guy we think Alabama's going to land to close out this class. And there's still some fireworks to be done. There always has been. Jimmy, the one thing I'll add, Joseph's a little younger, but he knows it's true. But Jimmy knows it's true because he's been doing it so long.
I'm old.
There's always been fireworks. Now, the NIL deals are just taxable Adidas bags dropped on front porches. Never forget, there was always the NIL. This is just taxable because they were always dropping bags. Where do you think it came from? So y'all enjoy it. Thanks for joining in. Hit that like and subscribe button. We appreciate everybody jumped in with the comments. Roll Tide, and we'll see you soon.
Roll Tide.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Roll Tide.